This is not another econ podcast. I'm Ian Kaneshiro. Think about it. Every pitch, every meeting, every strategic decision relies on your ability to communicate effectively. Imagine you're an ecom seller and you've been chasing a partnership with an industry-leading wholesaler. You've prepared your pitch and you've walked through that meeting with your head held high, ready to go. But as you present your proposal, the representative from the other side seems uninterested. They're closed off and their objection is really clear and you have a no at this point. And so you're heading back home. You're starting to ask yourself, was it something I said? Was it something I did? Why did this happen? And the fact of the matter is, it could have been that, or it could have been bad timing, and you just may never know. On this episode, we have Corey Ganim. Corey started in corporate software sales before pivoting full-time to Amazon in 2019. He sold over $10 million in brand name products in Amazon over the past 6 years, while hiring 30 plus VAs and cold calling over 2,000 suppliers. And this is while he's invested millions of dollars in wholesale and inventory in order to grow that business. And so one of the main components of Corey's story is about leveraging his background in sales and building crucial relationships, both internally with his team and externally with wholesalers. So we're going to dive a little bit into that today. So Corey, thank you for being here.
Yeah, Ian, thank you so much for having me, man. I'm looking forward to getting into this topic, especially talking about the sales side of the business, because I feel like that's a part of the business that a lot of people just gloss over.
Yeah, definitely. I think that one of the things that's really interesting is that there's a sales side because you're selling on Amazon, but there is this, you kind of need a sales pitch in order to buy from the wholesalers themselves. So it's a bit of a nexus that I'm sure we'll dive into a little bit right now. So Corey, will you give us a quick background, a quick update about what you're getting into today? What kind of different businesses you got your hands in? I think everyone would like to hear a little bit more there.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as my primary business, and this has been my primary business for, I guess I've been doing this full time since August of 2020. So really just over the 3-year mark of doing this full time. And that is my Amazon wholesale business. So you pretty much are spot on as far as our mission is to approach either the distributors or sometimes the manufacturer of the products themselves. And like you said, we're having to sell them on why they should sell to us, because a lot of these distributors, a lot of these brands, they don't want their products getting out there. They don't want just anyone out there selling them. So it's our goal to prove to them that we'd be a good partner, that we have their best interests at heart, and that at the end of the day, we're going to move a lot of their products. So that has been my core focus over the last 3 years, has been building that business. Like you said, we've done over $10 million in sales, all brand name products, never have created our own brands. We're just reselling existing brands. And that is, like I said, the bulk of my focus these days. Over the last, really all of 2023, I've spent a lot of time creating content, building my own personal brand and educating others on how they can do the same thing that I've done through products like our Wholesale Challenge that's available out there as well. But primarily the Amazon business has been my core focus for the 3 years that I've been doing it full time, but the 6 years that I've been doing it at all.
Yeah. I mean, I think it takes a lot to step out of your comfort zone, from even a sales job where you do have a paycheck coming in, to really focus on something that can be bigger than it is right now and even bigger than you. When you're hiring 30 plus VAs, that's a whole lot of people that are really counting on you to execute a strong business strategy to keep that business alive. Taking a step back, the intro that we spoke about is something that might hit a little close to home for you. I know that you were just on the road, you're at ASD, and you had some conversations with some wholesalers. Do you want to kind of unpack what happened at ASD last week?
Yeah, definitely. So I think a key component of this business that a lot of people probably don't realize getting into it is that Amazon Wholesale it's a B2B sales business essentially, right? Because not only are we selling products on Amazon to consumers, but we're having to go, like I said earlier, to these suppliers, to these manufacturers, to these distributors and sell them on why they should sell to us. So when we were at ASD this past weekend, there was one supplier in particular where it was the first day, it was kind of early on, and we walked up to his booth. We were looking at some of the products that he was carrying there. And right away, the first thing suppliers, whether you're in person at a trade show or whether you're talking to them on the phone, first thing they're going to ask you is, where do you sell, right? And most of them, In fact, probably 90+% of them, when you tell them that you sell on Amazon or that you're e-commerce, they immediately change their tone. They're not interested. They think you're not serious. They automatically write you off for a ton of different reasons that a lot of small-time Amazon sellers kind of give bigger sellers a bad rap because they've had poor experiences with small sellers in the past. So this particular supplier, as soon as I told him that we're e-commerce based, that we sell primarily through Amazon, I could tell like his tone changed. He went into this kind of generic pitch about how, okay, well, for e-commerce buyers, we do this. For our regular buyers, we do this. And it sounds like the e-commerce buyers are more of an afterthought for this particular company. But what I realize is that, and I've realized this from, being in this business for a number of years, is that they don't care if you sell on Amazon. That's not the objection. The objection is what's behind that, in that Amazon sellers, they're small time, they place small orders, they don't communicate, they're notoriously unreliable, they don't follow manufacturer pricing policies. They just do a lot of these things wrong. But with this particular supplier, I saw a product on his table that we already carry, like we already buy it on a regular basis. So I just said, okay, I understand, like you're probably not taking me seriously, but that product right there, first of all, what's your price? Second of all, however many you have, we want to buy all of them. Like I was very direct right out of the gate with him. And he was like, oh, well, that product, I can give it to you. We have 400 units in stock. I can sell it to you for $15. And we were currently paying $17 for that product. So on the spot, I said, okay, done deal. We shook hands. I wired him the money that same day. And you would think that I was like the greatest person with this guy. Like he did, earlier I said when I originally approached him, he was cold. He was kind of uninterested. The second I wired that money, it was like full 180. He was like, oh, what about this product? Are you interested in this? What about this brand? It's like, he completely changed his tune. And I asked him, I said, well, why is it that you didn't take me seriously at first versus now? And his direct response was, well, 99% of Amazon sellers, they don't know what they want, right? But you saw a product. I could tell you knew what you were talking about. I could tell that you were ready. Like you basically put your money where your mouth is, right? When you saw something you wanted, you took action, you pulled the trigger, and showed you were serious. So that's something that I think a lot of sellers can take away, is that if you really know what you want and if you're ready to pull the trigger when you see it, then the objections are going to melt away.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the interesting part is like, yeah, you absolutely have to put your money where your mouth is, but you didn't just put your money where your mouth is. You had the data to back it up. And, you probably sell a ton of different products, and, it's probably difficult to keep track on how much you pay for every single item. But at the end of the day, you knew your numbers, and you were able to use that knowledge to your advantage and know that you were getting a good deal. And this guy was also getting a good deal because he was able to sell what he had. And then at this point, you kind of flip the script on him, and now he's trying to sell you more. So I think that I think objection handling, it was kind of a key component there, but you went into the objection handling with the right backing already internally.
Yeah. And I mean, objection handling is exactly how I would describe it. And so this kind of goes back to, you mentioned I do have a corporate sales background. So I started a corporate sales job right out of college. I was selling on Amazon at the time, but obviously in a much more casual manner. So this corporate sales job was with a large IT company, and we actually went through 1.5 years of sales training before we were even allowed to go sell in the field. So I pretty much got a world-class sales education during that 1.5 year time frame. And that was one of the core tenets of their training philosophy, is the objection handling model. So we did a lot of mock role plays, a lot of sales case studies, really, where we'd have to go into a room with an advisor who'd been with the company for 30 or 40 years, like seasoned salespeople, and basically role play with them on how best to sell to customers, how best to handle objections. And like I said, a key tenet of that was the objection handling model. So I basically spent 1.5 years learning how to handle objections, learning how to address those, and then also confirm, like when you think you've addressed a concern, asking the prospect if that concern has actually been addressed, because a lot of times when you address a concern, the prospect might nod their head, they might say yes, but until you can actually get them to confirm that, hey, this objection is actually no longer an issue, sometimes it can still undermine you. So I think some of these sales techniques luckily translate very well into the Amazon wholesale space, and something that I wish a lot more people would focus on, because it's a relationship business and it comes down to your sales skills.
Yeah. I think what you're talking a little bit about is like the black swan, right? You're trying to find what is the why behind the why, because just like Amazon sellers, these businesses say Amazon sellers don't know what they want. In general, people don't know what they want, and we
Right.
And we're all emotional beings, and it's really easy to say, I actually want this, when really behind that, I have a completely different problem. And, I know I do that on a daily basis when I'm talking to anybody who's trying to sell me on a product, but also, when you're talking to your friends and your family, sometimes it's difficult to communicate. And I think that's what it like boils down to, is being able to effectively communicate and not just listen to what's the saying? There's like the difference between listening and hearing, right? And so
Right.
you might hear what somebody's saying, but are you actually listening to what they're saying and trying to read in between the lines?
Totally. And a lot of times just asking why will help uncover that. So for example, when I get the objection of, oh, sorry, we don't want to work with Amazon sellers, I say, okay, understood. Well, why is that? And then they might come back and say, well, the Amazon sellers that we've tried to work with, they place really small orders and they're not worth our time. Well, okay, that's the real objection, is they don't like people that come in and place small orders. So then if I can place large, consistent orders, then I'd probably be a better fit for your company than most other Amazon sellers. Is that fair to say? Oh, yeah, well, in that case, yeah, we'd want to work with you, right? And all it came down to is just asking why and then overcoming the real objection. Because like you said, a lot of times what people tell you, that's not the real objection. So the key is finding what the real objection is, which might require peeling back a couple of layers, asking why a few times. And then once you find that real objection, then crafting a response to overcome it, right? And at the end of the day, there's only going to be a handful of real objections. And if you have a tailored response to each of those, then your conversion rate's going to skyrocket.
Totally. And conversion rate is something that is funny, because like as Amazon sellers, when we're talking conversion rates, we're talking, in terms of PPC and the sales that I make. But there's what we're talking, Corey, what we're talking right now is we're talking the conversion rate of, I have an ask for a supplier and how often can I get them to sell me what I want. And I think one of the things that, you alluded to is that this seller in particular said, or this wholesaler, I should say, said, Amazon sellers typically place small orders. I think one of my questions is like, what do you consider a small order? And then that's
a great question.
Pulling in more information about like maybe a small order to him is a really large order to me and I can't take it. Or maybe a small order to him is a medium or also a small order to me, and that will allow me to either get a lot of product at a really good rate or diversify. Say, you know what, maybe I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket, but I'm going to get a good group of products here, and then go to somewhere else and find other ways to diversify my business. Because when the reselling business, you can't always put all your eggs in one basket, because there's so many components, from other competitors on the marketplace, buy box and Amazon's brand registry. Even it can be a challenge.
Exactly. And I think that goes back to asking why and getting at the real objection, because like you said, I mean, what they might consider a small order, it might be a small order to me, or it might not be, but asking those why questions to get at the real issue. Like, I think that's something every seller should just practice doing, is that when they get an objection, just ask why. Because I think way too many sellers, when they get an objection, they're way too quick to then go into a declarative statement of why they don't fit that objection. When in reality, if they just ask why and maybe ask why a couple more times, then they, like I said earlier, they get to the real objection and can look to overcome it at that point.
Yeah, I think your sales training, having a year and a half of sales training, really shows that this kind of strategy can be taught, developed, and honed. And it's not just a natural gift. Like, some people have it for sure, but it is something that can be learned. And so this is something that I don't think is talked about. So Amazon sellers talking to wholesalers, maybe go and find some sales training. I know we work with a CRM, which is a customer relationship management tool called HubSpot, and they have a ton of free content out there about sellings and about getting to the yes and objection handling. So I think it's just another tool that sellers are kind of missing out on at the moment.
And honestly, if somebody were to develop some sort of sales training specifically for Amazon wholesale sellers, I think it would do really well, because it's super niche, and two, there's nothing like it out there. I mean, there's any general sales training will help, but if someone could develop like a sales training curriculum specifically for wholesale sellers, I think that'd be super valuable, because in my experience, the people that succeed in Amazon wholesale are the best salespeople, right? Mm-hmm. The ones who can turn those no's to yeses, who can overcome objections, who can problem solve, who can build relationships, build rapport. And the people that are not successful in wholesale, like I know a lot of really smart people that have tried wholesale, but because they're afraid to get on the phone, they're not really people, you see what I mean? They're more comfortable either sitting behind a computer or dealing with spreadsheets, crunching numbers, which all of those things are part of the business, but it's a people first business. So I've seen a lot of really smart people that can't necessarily make it in wholesale because they don't have those sales skills. So, I mean, I think sales is the number one skill, most important skill for any business, any person, really just life in general. But in this business, it's a must have.
Cool. Kind of taking that into a bit more of a technical approach, right? We talked a little bit about the skill of selling, but it's a skill of selling, I should say. But you and I both know that there's a ton of tools that we use out there in order to accomplish our goals. Everything from like our scripts for our pitches. We use like a CRM tool, we use project management tools. We have templated emails and sequences and automations and stuff like that. Do you have anything that you feel like is kind of the key to your sales pitches to the wholesale seller?
So are you saying as far as like something to say, like something actually to mention, or just like a key component of the process?
I'm talking any way you want to take it. Do you have tools that you suggest to use in order to track? Do you have, tools that you've developed like a template or a sales pitch that you work through and redo and hone? What is important to you in that process when you're making contact, whether it's like in person, over the phone, email?
Yeah, so I'll tell you the number one most important component by far, and it's not even close. Before I get to that, I'll talk about a couple of things that maybe aren't quite as important that other people think are. So I'll tell you what's not important is having a fancy CRM and having a super souped up, built out Google Sheet, or, a lot of these resources that at the end of the day, you feel like when you mess with them, they're accomplishing something, but they don't actually move the needle. Like setting up your CRM is not going to get you more wholesale accounts. What's going to get you more wholesale accounts is getting on the phone and sending emails to suppliers. And even as far as what you say to some of these suppliers, yes, you want to test your pitch, you want to try out different approaches, different email templates, that type of stuff. But if you do it enough times, you're going to find what works. But the number one most important thing that everybody that like is the definition of how we've succeeded in our business that other people just don't really do is just the simple follow-up, right? So our number one most profitable wholesale account came from 3.5 years of follow-up, once a quarter, every quarter, same person I followed up with for 3.5 years to get that account. And I can't tell you how many people reach out to me and, I can't fault them for it because they clearly don't have a sales background, but they'll say, oh, well, I contacted 10 or 15 or even 20, 30 brands, but I didn't land any accounts or none of them are profitable. But then I ask, okay, well, how many times did you follow up with those ones that didn't reply? And 9 times out of 10, the answer is, well, either once or I haven't at all. When in reality, the accounts that you get on the first touch are going to be garbage. They're not going to be profitable. If they are, then there's no barrier to entry. And if they're profitable today, they won't be in 1, 2, or 3 months. But the best accounts by far take, in my experience, months, but the best ones take years of follow-up. Because they don't sell to just anybody. They only want to work with people they know. They only want to work with people that can get them results, which typically means more sales. And in order for them to trust that you're someone that can deliver on that level, you've got to build rapport, usually with at least one person at the company, if not multiple decision makers at the company. Follow up with them, stay in front of them. And then extra credit if you're connected with them on social media and you're constantly putting out content that educates them on how to better run their business. So really follow-up is the number one most important thing that everybody can and should be doing to grow their business. And again, this is stuff that's not specific to wholesale. This is just like sales 101, but you'd be surprised, and I don't think you would be surprised, but I think people out there would be surprised by how few people actually follow up.
Yeah. I think that's an amazing point, and I think that's grossly undervalued. We'll often say, following up is free, right? Like we do have systems in place to send automations and things like that, but it's generally not enough because that's a really short-term approach. And from our standpoint, being a software solution, we are looking for that engagement, right after you engage with us. But that long-term is something that's a bit more difficult, and especially in the wholesale game, you're right. You're working with people that also have other things going on that's not you, and so finding ways to keep on getting into their mind is super important, and it's free, right? It just takes time. And I think that you're right, that you can get the Ferrari of CRMs, but it's not going to move the needle. And, once you have, like, is there a number where, do you guys use a CRM at the moment? I guess is my question.
So we've used a couple of CRMs over the years, but we just use a good old Google Sheet. I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing that like a premium CRM could give us that's going to really move the needle. So we use a combination. So we use Google Sheets to track the actual people being followed up with. And then we use a to-do list app called Todoist to just schedule the follow-up. So basically, if I need to follow up with Joe at X distributor on Thursday, then I just create a quick task in Todoist, Joe's name, company name, phone number, and I can add comments to that task. So if I speak to him or if I have to leave him a voicemail, I'll just leave a comment there. And then I just change the due date to, let's say, a week out. And the thing about following up is, like you said, it's not difficult. It's not rocket science. And it doesn't even take much time. A lot of times it's a text message or even an email. It takes 10, 20 seconds, but it's a simple fact of doing it and doing it consistently, and also just scheduling it as part of your day. So I like to batch all my follow-ups onto Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Tuesday morning, I might follow up with, 4 or 5 people. Thursday morning, I might follow up with 4 or 5 people. And then as long as it's not like an urgent follow-up, I pretty much just push out the due date of that follow-up to 7 days later, right? So that I'm always staying in front of these people, assuming that's an appropriate cadence to be in front of them.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And having Tuesdays and Thursdays is a great rule. I think this is a perfect example of having like a standard operating procedure. But oftentimes, like, there's this argument of sales being kind of is it an art or a science? And I think it's a little bit of both, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's something to do with numbers, but also there's something to do with like the feeling of the salesperson themselves. I know that I have my standard operating procedure, but there's sometimes where I'm pushing that all aside because I feel that I know this better from experience.
Right. Yeah, totally. I mean, like I said, I like to follow up every Tuesday and Thursday, but if there's a situation, let's say I talk to a vendor and maybe they specifically request, hey, now's not a good time, check back in, a couple months. Typically, if they give me a time frame on which to check in with them, I usually like to cut that in half. So if they say follow up every quarter, I might follow up every, month and a half or so, 2 months at the most, just because you never know what can happen during that time frame. But also at the same time, you want to be respectful to them and make sure that you're not bugging them, when you shouldn't be. So that's kind of my take on that as well.
That's just experience right there. That's just telling you how to do it. And if someone tells you that on the phone, that comes with the tone that they say it. You might hear that they're just swamped right now, so they think that they're going to be busy for an entire quarter, but oftentimes they're not. Those kinds of feelings pass. And that goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier of like having that conversation, understanding the why. And that's really a key component to being an effective communicator. I really love that take on it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting and kind of going into a little bit more of, the sales thing is that you had mentioned that you had called over cold called 2,000 suppliers in your career. And so can you talk a little bit about like the tenacity and that it takes in order to kind of get through that? Because, you like you said, a lot of times that first touch, you get a no and you don't even want a yes on the first time. Because like you said, it's not the right point, but how do you keep on going when you're getting those no's, when they're not working, and even your best objection handling is not getting you to the right place?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So in the beginning, really the reason I kept going is because of the whole like idea that the more I get to pitch this, the more reps I get in, the better I'm going to get. So my first 100, 150, 200 conversations were weak. I didn't have a good pitch. I didn't really have faith in what I was, selling, quote unquote, because I didn't really have the track record to back it up. But once you get that first account, once you get those first couple of profitable products that you're selling, then you get a feel for how the business works. Then you know what suppliers are looking for. Then you can tailor your pitch a little better. And at that point, the rejections sting a little less because one, you've had so many. So it's like you just have the experience. And two, I always subscribe to the mindset that like every no is one, like you're one step closer to a yes with every no that you get. So it's almost like gamify it for myself where, if I know on average how many conversations I need to have to get a yes, and let's just say that number's 30, well then if I'm at 15, then I know that even if I just got a no just said, I'm like, all right, well really 15 more, and then I'm going to get that yes, right? So that kind of keeps me pushing. So that comes down to like knowing your numbers and being able to work backward to how many calls you need to make, how many prospects you need to add to your CRM, et cetera, to get basically to close an account or to find one new profitable product. And yeah, it really just comes down to, like I said, getting those reps in, getting better, and then just doing it day after day.
Yeah, I think that those reps really kind of remind you that you're in a power position there. As you grow your business, you're the one that's signing the checks. And often, depending on the size of the wholesalers, these account managers that you have also have their goals that they need to meet. They need to sell X amount of products. So they want to, but they also want to do it in the easiest way that they can sell the most in one fell swoop, rather selling, a little bit to every single little seller.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a key point too, is just, that's one of the things that I learned just from experience. I don't know when this kind of clicked for me, but at the end of the day, and this is really geared towards more working with like distributors and closeout suppliers as opposed to brands, because when it comes to working with distributors and some of these big like wholesalers, their main concern is how much money can you spend with me, right? Mm-hmm. They don't own the brand, so they don't really care if you can help their brands grow on Amazon because it's not their brands. But I've found that if I can make the life of my supplier as easy as possible, whether that be placing large orders, whether that be paying immediately, whether that be being proactive with my communication with them, telling them exactly what I'm looking for, if I can make their life as easy as possible and put as much money in their pocket as I can in the process, then they are going to love me. They're not going to want to work with anybody else. And it only takes a handful of really quality relationships like that to build a big business. I think there's a big misconception that you need 50, 100 wholesale suppliers to have a wholesale business, when in reality, you only need a handful of really good ones. And I mean, that's how our business operates, with a handful of really good suppliers, and you don't need that much more than that.
Right on. So Corey, as we kind of are nearing the 30-minute mark, and we're gonna end this episode, do you have any final thoughts about communication or the sales process with wholesale sellers? A little nugget of advice for any of our listeners?
Yeah. So really, and this sounds cliche, but bear with me. So it just comes down to leading with value. So knowing who you're talking to and knowing what value you can bring them. So like I said earlier, if you're talking to a distributor or a wholesaler or like a liquidator, one of those types of companies, the main value you can bring them is money, right? They only see dollar signs. They want to know how much can you spend with me and how often can you spend it. So tailoring your pitch and tailoring your approach to that, to basically how much you can spend with them is going to give you the best results there. And then when you're dealing directly with the manufacturer, directly with a brand, it's a completely different pitch, completely different approach. Your value there is going to be, what can you do to help them grow their sales on Amazon? So that might be a range of things. That might be, do they have poor listings that you could help them touch up? Do they not have a good PPC strategy in place that you could help them optimize? Are they brand registered? Are their competitors advertising on their branded keywords, et cetera, et cetera? There's so many problems that each brand faces, and it's going to be individual to that brand. So if you can uncover what that brand's pain point is in relation to Amazon, and then craft a response or a strategy on how to fix it, then that's going to best position you in the eyes of those manufacturers. So like I said, just leading with value at the end of the day, depending on who you're talking to.
Right. I love that. It's kind of what you're alluding to before. Make their lives easier, and they want to do business with you.
Exactly.
All right. So Corey Ganim is a seasoned Amazon seller who's made over $10 million in sales in his career. And Corey founded Brand Rocket, which is a company that partners with sellers to increase visibility and sales on Amazon. And from what we learned today, he's also a killer salesperson who has, some corporate sales training under his belt. So Corey, thank you so much for joining us today, and sharing with us your experiences.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.